Welcome to the Nucleus podcast. This week we're looking at nuclear energy through two radically different headlines: the wildfire near Sizewell B in Suffolk and China's record-breaking artificial sun. One presents nuclear power as critical infrastructure requiring protection. The other presents fusion as almost limitless clean energy. In both cases, though, the claims need careful handling.
They do. The Suffolk fire was a major emergency in its own right. It began shortly after 5:30 on Wednesday evening at Dunwich Heath, spread across approximately 100 hectares, and forced residents and around 200 holidaymakers to evacuate, including people at Cliff House Holiday Park. By Thursday afternoon, the response had grown to 120 firefighters and 18 fire engines, with reinforcements arriving from London. That is the story before we even mention nuclear power.
And yet Sizewell B dominated many of the headlines. We saw high alert, inferno evacuation, and even language suggesting the wildfire was closing in on the station. The reported distance was somewhere between 3 and 4 miles. What do we actually know about the nuclear dimension?
We know the station was reported to be on alert, and the Times reported concern that a change in the fire's direction could affect ventilation. Beyond that, the picture is incomplete. There was no reported fire inside the station, no reactor damage, no shutdown, no failure of safety systems, no radiation release, and no declared emergency within the nuclear site. The accurate formulation is that a major wildfire near Sizewell B placed the station on alert.
So near is doing a lot of work. Proximity matters, particularly when the Express says Sizewell B supplies approximately 3% of Britain's electricity. But proximity is not the same as impact.
Exactly. An alert may indicate a precautionary response, but we do not know whether high alert was a formal operational status or journalistic shorthand. We also do not know whether smoke, flame, or airborne particles created the ventilation concern, whether the operator changed station operations, or precisely how close the active firefront came. The coverage included no comments from the operator, regulator, or a named Sizewell official.
I'm struck by how quickly a serious but comprehensible emergency becomes an almost cinematic nuclear story. The Scottish Daily Mail called it an inferno and a mass exodus. Metro called it a monster wildfire. Is that simply tabloid excess, or does nuclear infrastructure legitimately alter the news value?
Both. A fast-moving wildfire a few miles from strategically important infrastructure is plainly a national story. Sizewell B's electricity contribution gives the location commercial and operational significance, but nuclear language also magnifies anxiety. Once nuclear power station enters a headline, readers may infer reactor danger even when none has been reported. Responsible commentary has to separate the confirmed emergency on the Heath from hypothetical consequences at the plant.
The operational reporting became more measured as the incident developed. Firefighters said they were making good progress on Thursday evening, although the situation was still described as dynamic on Friday morning. Those two descriptions are not necessarily inconsistent, are they?
No. Crews can improve the position while still facing changing winds, difficult terrain, or an uncertain fire boundary. What we should not do is convert good progress into fully contained. By the latest updates, the fire had not been confirmed as extinguished, and it was unclear when evacuees could return or what the final extent of the damage would be. The cause, any injuries, property losses, and the ecological consequences for Dunwich Heath also remained unknown.
The fire also arrived during what the coverage called Britain's fourth heatwave of 2026. Metro described the country as tinderbox dry and suggested wildfires were becoming a normal feature of British summers. That feels plausible as a wider narrative, but the evidence attached to this particular story is thinner.
It is. The hot and dry conditions are relevant context, especially when considering pressure on emergency services and infrastructure resilience. But the coverage does not establish that the heat wave, still less climate change, caused this particular ignition. We are not given the meteorological definition of those 4 heat waves or long-term data, demonstrating a trend in wildfire frequency. Metro also said heatwave deaths had doubled but did not identify the supporting figures, geography, or comparison period.
Still, the scale of the response raises a practical question. If local services require London fire engines and several brigades working overnight, are we beginning to see emergencies that test assumptions about where national resilience is needed?
That is the commercially important question. Infrastructure planning cannot focus only on the asset itself. It also depends on roads, local emergency capacity, evacuation arrangements, communications, and the surrounding environment. The Prime Minister, Burnham, called the incident very serious, and promised crews all the support they needed. That intervention underlines that resilience is not merely an operator issue. It involves government and regional response capacity as well.
Let's move from nuclear infrastructure being protected to nuclear technology being celebrated. China's experimental advanced superconducting Tokamak, often called an artificial sun, reportedly maintained plasma above approximately 100 million degrees Celsius for 1,066 seconds, 17 minutes and 46 seconds. That sounds extraordinary. How extraordinary is it?
It appears to be a genuine and significant experimental milestone, particularly because of the duration and stability. Fusion research is not simply a competition to reach the highest temperature for an instant. A future plant would need to confine sufficiently hot, stable plasma for sustained operation. The researchers described the result as progress from basic scientific exploration towards engineering practice.
But it did not become a power station for 17 minutes.
Correct. There is no evidence that the experimental advanced superconducting Tokamak produced net energy, generated electricity, or supplied power to a grid. A finite pulse lasting under 18 minutes is not continuous commercial operation, nor is there a commercial deployment date or any indication that the experiment resolved the remaining challenges around reactor materials, fuel cycles, maintenance, or overall cost.
There is also a timing point. The result was achieved earlier in 2025 and reported substantively in September of that year, so its appearance in this week's coverage does not establish that China conducted a new record-breaking experiment in July 2026.
Precisely, and there is a numerical discrepancy worth clearing up. One headline referred to 1 million degrees Celsius, whereas the fuller account reported approximately 100 million degrees Celsius. Those figures are obviously not interchangeable. The supportable figure here is the attributed 100 million degrees, but even spectacular temperature numbers should not distract from the central engineering issue: sustained, useful energy production.
This is where the language almost reverses. Suffolk generated catastrophe language without a reported nuclear incident. Fusion generated salvation language without electricity generation. The experimental advanced superconducting Tokamak was called groundbreaking, a beacon of hope and a possible turning point.
Yes, and the Financial Times letter recalling the 1959 book The Story of Zeta, Man-Made Sun, provides a useful corrective. Fusion has been presented as future energy for many decades. That does not diminish the Chinese achievement, but it should make us wary of treating every laboratory record as imminent commercialization.
Meanwhile, the wider nuclear coverage suggests plenty of appetite for ambitious projects. There is a proposed reactor 1 mile underground in Kansas, advanced nuclear plans in Oklahoma and Alaska, and an industry estimate that annual global nuclear investment would need to triple to approximately $250 billion to meet stated energy goals.
And that appetite is colliding with public trust. In Kansas, one resident said it was good to host the project but uncomfortable to be a guinea pig. In Oklahoma, the emphasis was on transparency. Those are commercially significant concerns. Novel technology does not receive automatic consent because its proponents describe it as advanced or clean. Host communities want clear information about safety, environmental effects, and who bears the risk of a first-of-a-kind project.
There is an interesting demand story too. A proposed $100 billion Kentucky complex combines data centers with new natural gas generation at a former uranium site. It is not a fusion project, but it shows the search for enormous quantities of dependable power, particularly around artificial intelligence infrastructure.
Yes, although these technologies and projects should not be conflated. Fusion, advanced fission, and natural gas generation involve very different commercial and regulatory questions. What connects the stories is the demand for high-capacity energy and the willingness of governments and investors to consider large, unconventional projects. The unresolved issue is whether technical ambition can be matched by finance, delivery, and public legitimacy.
So the takeaways are: the Suffolk wildfire was a substantial human and emergency services event, but there is no reported nuclear incident at Sizewell B. Britain's heatwave provides context, not proven causation, and China's fusion record represents real progress in plasma control, not proof of net energy or commercial electricity. What does that leave us with on sentiment?
No market reaction, electricity price effect, or share price movement was reported in this week's news stories, so market sentiment is thin rather than measurable. Reporting sentiment swung between alarm in Suffolk and technological optimism around fusion, while community coverage remained wary. Overall, the industry mood this week was cautiously ambitious and sentiment was mixed. Thank you for listening to the Nucleus podcast. See you in the next one.